Yo, what is going on, everyone? How we all doing today? This is going to be today a Week 4 recap of the NFL slate. We're going to talk some fantasy football. We're going to talk about some major injuries that have happened as well. Not a great fantasy football week for me once again. I mean, my teams all around the board, once again disappointed. I didn't get one win in any of my leagues this week, so I'm down pretty bad right now. But luckily it's still early. Definitely can bounce back at some point, but for right now it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle fantasy football wise for me, so hopefully it gets better in the future. But obviously we are going to so we'll get into the Sunday slate to start off with. Do have some major injury news too to go over as well. Got quite a few different players that have gotten hurt. And if you'd like to start with that, we can. So really, the big news coming this week was Rashee Rice, one of the top receivers in the NFL, going down and has feared to have torn an ACL. Still undergoing further testing and stuff. We haven't gotten an actual confirmation that it isn't torn ACL yet, but I'm sure. Within this week, we will find out more information about that. But from what it's saying, it looks like it's not good, and he's going to be missing a lot of time. So that's a big loss for all Rashee Rice owners, which myself, I had him in 2 of my leagues. I was really high on him this year. And it just sucks to see a player of that caliber go down, especially for the price tag you were getting him at, too. And then Jonathan Taylor has supposedly a high ankle sprain, but they're calling it on the low end. I'm not really too sure about the reports coming out saying he could be back next week, but if he's not back next week, then Trey Sermon, definitely a guy that is worth a waiver wire pickup if you're needing a running back desperately. If he does end up being out this week, Trey Sermon should be the starting running back there while he's out. And then other injury news, I mean, we're still awaiting the Malik Neighbors concussion stuff, seeing if he'll be fully ready for their matchup next week. Other than that, Anthony Richardson, another guy that got hurt, do think that he will be fine. I don't think he's going to miss any time, so he should be back next week. But if not, then Joe Flacco is definitely a great pickup for QB if you need a QB. Say you're in like a 2 QB league or something, you could definitely go after him. I don't think we had any other injuries that I can think of off the top of my head that happened. I think that's pretty much all of them that were pretty serious. I mean, Will Levis went down too, supposedly. So there is a chance that Mason Rudolph might be the starter going forward with the Titans. We'll see how all that goes. I'm not too sure. But that game was a little weird last night, seeing him on the bench like that, basically bawling his eyes out. I'm not too sure if that was because of injury or if that was just because he got benched. I mean, I have no idea. So for the first game that we're going to go through, we'll start with the Patriots 49ers. This game kind of went how, honestly, everyone expected. Me being a Patriots fan, it's what I expected. Team is just not good. Where we just are not good offensively whatsoever. And I will continue to say this, that there's honestly no one on this Patriots team that is worth a roster spot other than Ramondre Stevenson and maybe Antonio Gibson. Ramondre Stevenson's been struggling with turnovers. He's had a fumble in every single game this year, and I think that's the reason why you're starting to see a little bit more usage from Antonio Gibson. Gibson with the 3 receptions for 67 yards off of 4 targets. Stevenson still had 4 receptions, but he only had 19 yards. Did get 5 targets as well. He still had the bulk of the carries in this offense, but obviously going into next week, it is a little bit of a concern with how much Ramondre continues to turn the ball over, which is not helping this team whatsoever, to see that Antonio Gibson might get a larger role going forward, so we'll kind of see how that goes. And then if there's any receiver on the Patriots that you're have any interest in, I mean, the only one really worth a roster spot for deeper leagues is Jalen Polk. just because he's the young guy who could ascend and become number one here. He is starting to look like he could be the number one guy, but I don't want to overreact after 1 week because Demario Douglas looked like the top guy. I mean, Hunter Henry's looked like the top guy some weeks. So, I mean, there's just still a lot of questions in the air with this Patriots offense, like if anyone's going to ascend, because, I mean, it's just not a good offense. So, really, there's just not a lot of guys on this team I'm interested in. But obviously, it's complete opposite with the 49ers. You go to the 49ers side. Brock Purdy put up a pretty decent performance. Jordan Mason had a great game once again. Jordan Mason continues to show that he is like a top 5 running back with no McCaffrey in this league, just because of how amazing the 49ers offense is, with the 24 carries for 123 yards and a touchdown. And you did see some receiving usage for him too, 2 receptions for 37 yards. So you would love to keep seeing that from him, just because he didn't really have a lot of receiving usage in college in this whole time that he's been in the league so far, but it looks like they got him a little bit involved this week. So, and then once again, Juwan Jennings leads the team in targets, even with George Kittle, Ayuk, and Samuel all in. It definitely got spread around everywhere. So, Ayuk continues to be disappointing. Ayuk has still not had a game where he has completely went off yet. He doesn't even have a touchdown on the year. Ayuk is starting to kind of fall down my rankings now when it comes to wide receivers, after thinking that he could have the potential to be top 10 this year, but it's not looking too good right now for him. So, but Debo came in, played a decent game, nothing special, and then Kittle came back, and for tight end's sake, he had a pretty decent game as well. So, 49ers are now 2-2, the Patriots are now 1-3. Next matchup, we got Saints-Falcons. Falcons barely pulled this win out off a game-winning field goal from Yun-Ho Koo. Once again, we go to the Saints side of things, and Alvin Kamara continues to be an absolute fantasy monster. Just because of his usage in the passing game, it just continues to show every week. 7 receptions for 42 yards off 9 targets. So he continues to be a huge role on the receiving side of things, and he did also get that rushing touchdown as well, 19 carries for 77 yards. Chris Olave with a pretty decent game, got 10 targets, but the biggest surprise was seeing how many targets Shaheed got. Shaheed came in 11 targets. It's the most targets he's ever had in his career. Came in, played a pretty good game. Would you expect that from a week-to-week basis with Shaheed? I don't want to say yes. I think it was just because Shaheed is usually more of a big play type of guy, so they used him a lot more in the short passing game this game, so it's very interesting to see that. And then you go to the Atlanta side of things, and really the story on this side is Bijan. Bijan came in and did not look like the better running back in this game. Tyler Algier came in, looked like he was the better guy. Bijan obviously is still the better receiving back in my eyes. I mean, he still had 4 receptions for 46 yards. So overall, didn't completely have a bust game or anything with that usage. And then Tyler Algier had 2 receptions for 20 yards. But he did have 8 carries for 60 yards, better than Bijan's 7 carries for 28. So I do want to say that Algier is definitely a guy, waiver wire-wise, if he's available in one of your leagues. I think he's definitely a premium handcuff back, no doubt, someone that you can hold on to in case of a Bijan injury, because he could arguably be a top 10 running back coming in to a week-to-week basis if there is no Bijan, if Bijan somehow goes down. And then you look at the receiving side of things, Drake London just absolutely dominated the target share in this offense this week. 6 receptions, 64 yards. Definitely what we expect from Drake London. Now, obviously, we do expect him to have a little, I mean, it was a good game, but we could obviously have a better game with the amount of target usage he got, and he didn't get no touchdowns. And then Darnell Mooney continues to show that he is number 2 guy in this offense to me. Even though Ray McCloud had 7 targets, it doesn't really matter. Mooney, I think, is still the second option on this team. But just as big of a story as Bijan, though, is how disappointing Kyle Pitts is continuing to be. Kyle Pitts has had a pretty decent first week. Ever since that first week, Kyle Pitts has just kept going down, down, down. Puts up a donut this week. It's getting to the point with Kyle Pitts. Is it even worth starting this guy anymore? Because of just how he has been playing so far this season. He's been a very big disappointment, which has kind of been his whole career in the NFL so far. It's just been very disappointing. So we'll continue to monitor that. But the Saints are 2-2, or the Falcons are 2-2 now. Saints go down to 2-2 after the Saints looked like one of the top teams in the NFL going for the first 2 weeks, which I was obviously believing was an overreaction from the get-go. I was like, it's too early in the season to think that this Saints team is legit. But they are a great team, but they're not a top 5 team in the league. So, Rams Bears up next. This was a really strong showing from the Bears. Big win for them. The Rams obviously have a bunch of injuries going on, so I don't want to say it's a completely impressive win just because of how much the Rams are beat up, but you could also say it was an impressive win because the Rams went out and beat the 49ers last week. So, looking at the Rams side of things, obviously Kyren Williams continues to be the top guy in this offense overall. With all these injuries that are going on right now, Kyren Williams is getting all the usage in the backfield, getting a lot of usage in the passing game too. 4 targets, 4 receptions for only 10 yards, but still gets the 4 receptions. And then 19 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. He continues to dominate, looking like a top 5 running back right now in the league. And then you go to the receiving side of things, and I do continue to say that, I mean, if you're in a deeper league and you want to pick up any guys, I mean, Tutu Atwell continues to show that he is one of Matthew Stafford's favorite targets with no Puka, no Cooper Kupp. Jordan Whittington had a pretty decent outing as well. So it's looking like these 2 guys are kind of at the top right now when it comes to usage in this offense with the 2 top dogs out. And then Colby Parkinson is maybe worth the tight end spot if you need a tight end. He is going to continue to get a lot of usage with these weapons out for the Rams. So Parkinson's not a bad guy to go and look forward to. I mean, you won't expect a lot from him from a talent perspective, but he definitely does have the usage there in this offense with a lot of players being down for the Rams. And then on the Bears side of things, Caleb Williams, I mean, didn't have a lot of passing yards this game, but honestly, it was really the rushing attack and DeAndre Swift with the monster game. Don't want to say it was a dumb decision because of how bad DeAndre Swift has looked to start this year, but it's just very frustrating seeing DeAndre Swift with 20-something points on my bench. It sucks very much. He led in receiving, led in rushing. DeAndre Swift had a great game. Cole Kmet, 3 receptions, 34 yards. I think he is still not a bad tight end to have if you need him. DJ Moore had the touchdown, kind of saved his fantasy week. He only had 3 receptions for 22 yards, but I will continue to say that the majority of these guys involved in this offense are definitely all worth a roster spot just because Rome Odunze could have a lot of potential going forward. Really, the only guy that could have a downward trend is probably Keenan Allen just because of his age. And obviously, there's just so many people to feed in this offense with how it looked this week. So Keenan Allen's probably the one with the least value going forward. Everyone else in this offense, to me, definitely has more value than him. So, but a big win for the Bears. They are now 2-2. Rams are 1-3. Feel really bad for the Rams, though. They just cannot stay healthy. Vikings and Packers up next. Now, what a game this was. This game kind of seemed like it was going to start out to be a blowout, and then it got very interesting at the end. This was the first game back for Jordan Love after that MCL sprain, and he, from a real-life perspective, didn't really play the best game. I mean, he did throw 3 interceptions, but from a fantasy perspective, I mean, he played very well with 389 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. Definitely had a pretty big fantasy week. And I was obviously debating who to start, Jordan Love or Sam Darnold this week, because I had both, and I was like, which one do I want? And Sam Darnold looked like he was the guy for sure that I probably should have started, but then Jordan Love just threw a lot of touchdowns in that second half, so that kind of boosted him back up, and he had the better fantasy performance. But we go to the Viking side of things, and Aaron Jones continues to impress and continues to show that I'm just an idiot and that my opinion obviously can not matter a lot sometimes. And this is one that I'm going to own up to and say, man, I did not expect Aaron Jones to play this well this year. And what do you know? He's coming out proving me wrong. He is such a great receiving back, too. He's got a lot of usage in the backfield and the receiving game as well. And then Jordan Addison comes back from that injury and has a great game. He gets 2 touchdowns. Yes, he only had 4 targets, but 3 receptions for 72 yards, one carry for 7 for that touchdown. So Jordan Addison with a huge game coming back after that injury. And then Justin Jefferson obviously continues to be the alpha on this team. Everyone else, so really there's no one else on this Minnesota team that's worth a roster spot to me. Obviously, other than T.J. Hawkinson whenever he comes back from injury, but there's really no one else on this offense that's really worth anything. Just continue to have Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones. Those are all guys worth fantasy spots for sure. They continue to impress. Green Bay side, Josh Jacobs kind of almost had a split backfield here with Emmanuel Wilson, but he did look like the more efficient runner. He did get involved in the receiving game too. 4 receptions, 27 yards. So not a bad performance from Josh Jacobs. Pretty decent. And then the receiving side of things, man, Jaden Reed is for sure, I think, the top guy on this team, and it's going to show every week. He's definitely wide receiver 1 in my eyes in Green Bay, even though he didn't get the most targets this week. Actually, Dontavian Wicks and Tucker Kraft had more targets than him, and then Romeo Doubs tied him. Dontavian Wicks is another guy. Definitely a waiver wire pickup this week if you're wanting to get another receiver that you need. After maybe say you just lost Rashee Rice, if you need another receiver, Dontavian Wicks isn't a bad guy to go get after the week that he had with the 2 touchdowns, 5 receptions for 78 yards. So with Jordan Love back in this offense, obviously all these receivers are going to be a lot better. So this is what we were talking about in videos in the past. Tucker Kraft, honestly looking like a tight end worth going and getting. I know he's on a lot of waivers for a lot of teams just because of the fact that Malik Willis was under center these last couple weeks. But with Jordan Love back, I think Tucker Kraft's value goes up tremendously. So Tucker Kraft's definitely one of those tight ends since we got bye weeks coming up. Definitely worth a start, I think. He's looking like one of the better waiver pickups this week when it comes to the tight end side. And then Romeo Doubs, yes, he's been disappointing. He did get 8 targets, but Romeo Doubs has not had the great start to the season. So he's looking like he might not be wide receiver 2 on this team after the performance that Dontavian Wicks had. Other than that, Luke Musgrave, definitely a guy worth dropping. I don't think he has any worth in this offense. He's not the top tight end anymore there. And then Christian Watson, I did forget that he did get hurt. Looking like he's probably going to be out for a little bit, I think a couple weeks at least. So that definitely diminishes Christian Watson's value on this team. So just because there's so many people to feed on this team as well, I just don't really expect Christian Watson to have a bigger year going forward. So is he still worth a roster spot? Yes, if you're in deeper leagues and stuff, for sure. But yeah, Christian Watson's also had somewhat of a disappointing start to the season. So Minnesota is 4-0. Honestly, the biggest surprise of the season in my eyes so far. They've been playing outstanding, and they continue to get really good wins. Their defense is legit. Even though they did give up a lot of points this game, they still played very well. I mean, Jordan Love still threw 3 picks. So, yeah, this Minnesota team's pretty good on both sides of the ball. You got Steelers and Colts up next. Now, this game ended up being a lot more high-scoring than I thought. Pittsburgh actually did not have any struggle scoring the ball whatsoever this game. Justin Fields had a great fantasy performance, 312 passing yards for a touchdown, and then he gets 2 rushing touchdowns as well. So he's kind of looking like we're getting flashes from him on the Bears with his rushing ability in this game. So that's really cool to see. And then you look at the rushing side of things. And, I mean, Najee obviously got the most work, but he wasn't the most efficient back. Cordell Patterson actually was the most efficient back, and I believe Cordell Patterson got hurt as well. So if Cordell Patterson's hurt, then Najee Harris goes up tremendously, but we'll see if Jaylen Warren comes back this week. But Najee Harris continues to disappoint on the rushing side of things. But he did actually have a pretty decent performance on the receiving side of things. He had 6 targets, 3 receptions for 54 yards. So he kind of saved his bust play this week with his receiving upside. And then obviously George Pickens continues to be the top guy on this offense. 7 receptions, 113 yards off 11 targets. So he's going to continue to get a lot of that usage target-wise. He's going to continue to have a lot of opportunities to be a very great wide receiver for fantasy purposes. And then Pat Freiermuth had a very great week as well. 5 receptions for 57 yards and a touchdown. So Pat Freiermuth, if he's available in leagues for you as well, which I don't really know how many leagues he's available in, but if he's he's another tight end, definitely worth going and picking up after the week that he had and after how this Pittsburgh offense looked this week. So is there any other guys worth getting on this team? No, not in my eyes. There's not any other receivers or anything that really pop out, But you look at the Colts side of things, and obviously the Anthony Richardson injury happened, and Joe Flacco came in, threw 2 touchdowns. Honestly, obviously the passing game is going to go up tremendously with Joe Flacco under center. But if Anthony Richardson is back, then obviously you take these stats that you see from this game and you kind of go down a little bit just because of that aspect. Because Anthony Richardson is obviously kind of like Lamar Jackson. He's a very great running back quarterback. He's really good at running the ball. And his passing volume is going to go – the passing volume in this offense will just go down with Anthony Richardson under center. So, but Jonathan Taylor, yes, he got hurt. Still had a great fantasy performance with the 21 carries, 88 yards, 3 receptions for 20 yards off of 4 targets. And then, obviously, with Joe Flacco in, Michael Pittman had a great game. He 6 receptions for 113. Josh Downs had a great game, too. 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. So Josh Downs, his role continues to grow in this offense. And say if Joe Flacco is starting under center this week, I think Josh Downs is one of the top waiver wire pickups this week if he's available in your league. So I would definitely go and pick him up. And Adonai Mitchell, at this point, it just does kind of seem like he is worth dropping. I don't really know if he has any more worth in this offense with Josh Downs coming back. So that's very disappointing to see. For all the people who thought Adonai Mitchell was going to be wide receiver 2 on this offense, doesn't look like it at this point. Looks like Josh Downs has already solidified himself as number 2. So, but yeah, Colts are 2-2. Pittsburgh gets their first loss on the season. Next up, we got Broncos and Jets. Now, this might have been one of the most boring games to watch in the world. If I was a Broncos or a Jets fan, I would probably turn off the TV. I mean, honestly. This was just such an ugly game from the get-go. Bo Nix and the fact, this is another crazy thing, the fact that the Broncos won this game and Bo Nix only threw for 60 passing yards is just unreal to me. Javonte Williams from the rushing side actually didn't have a terrible game. He only had 2 receptions for 3 yards in the backfield on the receiving side of things. Jaleel McLaughlin continues to have a role in this offense too, 9 carries for 46. He was the more efficient back just by a little bit. It's just kind of the same with this Broncos team. With Bo Nix under center, their offense is not going to be that great. It's going to continue to be that way. And literally everything is going to funnel around Courtland Sutton when it comes to the passing attack. And it showed in this game. He had 9 targets. He had 60 receiving yards, 3 receptions for a touchdown. So pretty decent fantasy performance for Sutton. But like I said, this offense is terrible. Sutton's still a guy that if you're desperate for a flex spot, yeah, you could maybe flex him just because of his usage in this offense. But the Denver just does not look good. So, they're going to continue to not look good this season offensively. And then all the other receivers, there's no one worth a roster spot on this team other than Courtland Sutton on the receiving side of things. So, just keep it that way. Jets on the other side of things, what a disappointing performance for the Jets, man. No rushing game whatsoever. The rushing game was just completely non-existent. Braylon Allen was the more efficient guy. Breece Hall played terrible, just absolutely terrible. The worst game of Breece Hall's fantasy season so far. Mike Williams actually led the team in receiving Garrett Wilson with another disappointing game. Alan Lazard showing that he's got a big role in this offense still. Tyler Conklin with a disappointing game. For sure, they have 3 guys that are worth roster spots on this team on the receiving side of things still, because Garrett Wilson's obviously, I think he's still the alpha on this team. He's just had a very disappointing start to the year. Alan Lazard is definitely worth the roster spot just because of his usage and his target share. He's getting a lot of targets in this offense. And then Mike Williams, definitely worth in deeper leagues a roster spot just because it's Mike Williams. And yes, he's getting older. He is going on a downturn, but he does have a role in this offense. So I do think that you do continue to start him. Not start him, but definitely worth the roster spot, I think, compared to some other guys. But, yeah, Jets just did not look good this game. Broncos are now 2-2, and the Jets are now 2-2. So this Jets offense has not looked great to start the year. Buccaneers and Eagles next now. Man, Baker Mayfield, he just continues to have a great season. I mean, he had a pretty bad game last week. Not the best fantasy performance from him last week. But this week he comes back and just another rushing touchdown, 2 passing touchdowns, 347 passing yards. I mean, Baker's slaying in that fucking pigskin, man. He's definitely looking really good. Mike Evans had a big chunk of the targets in this offense with 14, and Godwin obviously second in line with 6 receptions for 69 yards. Mike Evans got the touchdown. Cade Otton, without this passing attacks looking to start the year, Cade Otton's definitely another tight end that's probably worth having in some leagues. He had a great game as well, so definitely worth a waiver wire pickup if he's available. And then you look at the rushing side of things, and Bucky Irving continues to show that his role continues, I believe, to grow a little bit in this offense. He's looking like he might end up being the better back on this team, even though they both had the same amount of rushing yards off of 10 carries, which is kind of crazy. You don't see that often. But obviously Rachaad White continues to be the better receiving back, but Bucky Irving is definitely showing that he's worth a roster spot, and he could end up being the top guy eventually. So definitely keeping him is a very smart thing to do if you have him, for sure, just because there is a chance he could end up being the top guy later on in the season because Rachaad White's role is kind of diminishing in this offense. And then you look at the Philly side of things, and once again, just another from a real-life perspective, another pretty disappointing performance for Jalen Hurts. I mean, he did get you a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. So fantasy-wise, he didn't have a bad game. Saquon didn't have a bad game either. He's obviously getting all the usage in this offense. So just continue to start Saquon. He still might be the number 1 running back to end the year off if he stays healthy. And then Goddard, obviously Goddard was going to be the top target in this offense with no A.J. Brown on Devontae Smith, so he kind of had the game that everyone was expecting. No one else on this offense is worth a roster spot, so I wouldn't even bother. But when A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith come back, Jalen Hurts will probably solidify himself as a top 5 fantasy quarterback going forward. So, but what a big week for Tampa Bay, man. 3-1 on the season, great start. Philly is now 2-2. So I wouldn't overreact about Jalen Hurts' real-life perspective, how he's playing, just because his 2 top weapons on offense are out right now. So Bengals, Panthers up next. Looking at this side of things, the Bengals were desperate for a win. I had a feeling that they were going to come into this week and light it up, and of course, and they did. They had a great week. I mean, Chase Brown had a huge game, 15 carries for 80 yards, 2 touchdowns, and I know he's not available in a lot of leagues, but if he's available in deeper leagues, I think he's worth a spot for sure. Or in a league that is smaller, like a 10-team league or something like that. I think he's definitely worth a roster spot for sure, because I think he's looked like the better running back on this team from the jump, and he continues to show that he is, and so there is a chance Zach Moss is going to start losing his role a little bit, and Chase Brown's role is just going to keep growing. But Zach Moss still had a great game too. I mean, he had that receiving touchdown, 4 receptions for 27 yards, and Zach Moss, 15 carries for 51 yards. So not a disappointing game for Zach Moss whatsoever, but Chase Brown obviously had the better game. Jamar Chase, alpha, continues to show it. Another huge touchdown right there in that game. T. Higgins, a lot of targets, 10 targets in this offense. 6 receptions for 60 yards. So T. Higgins just basically came this week and said, "No, I'm number 2." And I ain't 3. I'm number 2 for sure. Yossi Voss, you can go down the drain, basically. So really there's no one else on this team that's worth the roster spot receiving-wise, just those 2 guys. And then Chase Brown and Zach Moss are worth spots for sure. And then Carolina's side of things, Andy Dalton kind of came back to life this week. I mean, he didn't have like a terrible fantasy performance, but definitely didn't have the one that he had last week for sure. So Chuba Hubbard continues to dominate in this offense. Chuba Hubbard's looking like ever since Andy Dalton came under center, that Chuba's been just thriving. So 18 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown, 4 receptions for 17 yards. So Chuba Hubbard is looking really good. We'll kind of see how this all goes whenever Jonathan Brooks comes back from that injury and see how his role is in this offense going forward. And then Deontay Johnson, obviously the top guy in this offense, he's going to continue to show it every week. So he's definitely looking like a really good wide receiver to have. Xavier Legette was the one guy that we were saying that he could be definitely worth a roster spot. Just give it a little bit of time. And he's looking like he's a pretty solid rookie receiver. He had 10 targets. He had that touchdown, 6 receptions for 66 yards. So his best game of the season so far. And I think it's only up from here for Legette. I think he's going to continue to show that he has a dominant role in this offense. So he could be number 2 going forward. I think he will take Jonathan Mingo out of the picture. And then with this Adam Thielen injury, I think this is going to show that, obviously, I think I should have a big role in this offense constant, even if Thielen does come back. But Cincinnati, 1-3, first win of the season. Carolina goes to 1-3. Next up, we got Jaguars, Texans. Jaguars continue to be one of the biggest disappointments of the season. They just do not look good whatsoever. Trevor Lawrence continues to play like shit. The rushing side of things, Travis Etienne, they were saying that he apparently on the broadcast, for some reason, they were making it seem out to be that he was getting benched. But that wasn't the case. He did get hurt, I think, and it wasn't like a serious injury or anything. He should be back next week. But Tank Bigsby came in and was a more efficient running back, 7 carries for 90 yards. And then Etienne only had 11 carries for 50 yards. Tank Bigsby is definitely like another like premium handcuff back in my eyes. Now, I wouldn't say he'd be top 10 just because of how bad this offense is, but he's definitely worth a roster spot just in case of an Etienne injury. He could thrive pretty well in this offense. And then you look at the receiving side of things, Brian Thomas continues to show that he could end up being the top receiver on this team. He is one of Trevor Lawrence's favorite targets. He did have the touchdown, 6 receptions, 86 yards. So very talented receiver. I think he's going to continue growing his role. But Christian Kirk did dominate the targets in this game. He had 7 receptions, 61 yards, and a touchdown. So a pretty good fantasy performance from him as well. And then Gabe Davis is looking like a guy that might be just someone you have to drop. I don't think Gabe Davis is looking any good whatsoever. Gabe Davis is probably definitely worth dropping in those deeper leagues for sure. I just don't see a lot of usage with him in this receiving game with how bad their offense is as well. And then Houston side of things, C.J. Stroud had a great game. Cam Akers disappointing, filling in for Joe Mixon. Just all he got was some running back usage. He didn't get no receiving usage whatsoever. So, yeah, disappointing game for Cam Akers. Receiving side of things, Nico Collins continues to be the alpha dog. He's looking like a top 5 receiver this year with how he's playing with the 12 receptions, 151 yards off of 15 targets. Obviously, those 15 targets facilitated to him more just because of the aspect that there was no Tank Dell. But Stephon Diggs continues to be second, 5 receptions, 69 yards off 9 targets. And then Schultz continues to disappoint. Schultz at this point is probably worth a drop, especially if Tank Dell comes back anytime soon. I don't think Dalton Schultz has any worth in this offense whatsoever anymore, just because of how much they're spreading the ball out to these 3 receivers. But showing that these 2 receivers showed up this week and Schultz had, once again, another disappointing fantasy performance, I think he's definitely worth dropping. But big win for the Texans. They're 3-1 in the year, 0-4 for the Jaguars. Jaguars got some problems right now. They're in some deep water. Commanders and Cardinals, and my goodness, this is another biggest surprise of the season, is how good this Washington offense looks. I mean, Jaden Daniels is looking like one of the steals of the draft when it comes to QBs. Just an absolute great game from him, fantasy-wise. Very efficient, too. He did throw 1 pick, but, 26 for 30, 233 yards and a touchdown, and then 8 carries for 47 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Daniels is looking like a dog. Terry McLaurin continues to be the top guy in this receiving core. 7 receptions, 52 yards off of 10 targets. Really the only receiver worth picking up on this offense in my eyes. And then Zach Ertz didn't have the best game, but I think he is still worth a roster spot for tight end wise if you need a tight end. He's had a pretty decent start to the season. But none of these other receivers really catch my eye, even though Zacchaeus had a pretty decent game. I wouldn't overreact on that one. I don't think he's really worth a roster spot. Brian Robinson obviously would know. Eckler, we were expecting him to dominate. And he had a pretty good game, 21 carries, 101 yards and a touchdown. It's very interesting to see Jeremy McNoles have somewhat of a role in this offense. It took 2 touchdowns away from Brian Robinson, though, too. So that was very interesting. But Brian Robinson still had a great game, still looking like a really good running back end of season right now. And then Kyler Murray, very disappointing game for him. Just no good, just no bueno. This offense looked terrible. James Conner had a big game, though. 18 carries, 104 yards and a touchdown. And then you finally kind of saw Trey Benson coming to the game for the first time. Obviously, it was a blowout. That was why. But you kind of got some flashes of how Trey Benson could be in this offense going forward. So is there a chance Trey Benson could have a role in this offense in the future? Yes. But for right now, no. James Conner continues to be the top guy. But in case of an injury, Trey Benson definitely could be a guy worth handcuff-wise to have. And then you look at the receiving side of things, and Marvin Harrison continues to be the top guy, 5 receptions, 45 yards and a touchdown. Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, disappointing games for them. When Trey McBride comes back, I think Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson both are guys probably worth dropping at this point. But a huge win for the Commanders. They continue to be one of the biggest surprises of the year. They are 42-4. They are 3-1 on the season. So huge game for them. Raiders Browns. All right, so we got 1, 2, 3. We got 5 games left. All right, we'll try to skim through these. Raiders and Browns. Not really a lot to talk about in this game, to be honest with you. Deshaun Watson just continues to be disappointing. Jerome Ford continues to be the lead back, had a pretty decent game. He had 7 receptions out of the backfield. But with Nick Chubb coming back, I believe this week, Jerome Ford's role might diminish. So that is very unfortunate for Jerome Ford fantasy owners. So just keep on the lookout for that. I think Jerome Ford will still have a role in this offense, but if Nick Chubb comes back and starts playing better than Jerome Ford, then Nick Chubb's going to be the top guy. And then Deontay Foreman, definitely worth dropping, not worth having any role on this team anymore. And then obviously the receivers, very disappointing, other than really Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy had a really good game, being number 2, 9 targets. And then Ramari Cooper, just a very disappointing game for him after having a big game last week. Just shows you that this passing attack in Cleveland is not great, and I don't think it's going to get any better unless you get Jameis Winston under center. And then Vegas side of things, yes, they got the win, just an ugly win. The running backs continue to just be a dumpster fire here. Madison's looking like the better guy overall, but Zamir White had the majority of the carries. But Alexander Madison continues to show that he is looking like the more efficient running back going forward. So Madison's definitely got a little bit more value than Zamir White does at this point. And then receiving side of things, Jacoby Myers dominated this game in the targets. He had an okay fantasy performance. Trey Tucker had a pretty good game. He did get that touchdown rushing-wise, so that was pretty big for him. But when Devontae Adams comes back, Trey Tucker's not worth a roster spot in my eyes. And then Brock Bowers, definitely a disappointing game for him. I thought he was going to have a huge week with no Devontae Adams. I thought he was going to be the top receiver in this backfield. But no, that is not the case. He had a very disappointing game, only 3 targets. So yeah, just not the best game for Brock Bowers. But Vegas is 2-2, Cleveland's 1-3. I don't like either one of those offenses at all. So, and then Chiefs Chargers, obviously. With Justin Herbert back, I was a little bit higher on the Chargers this week, thinking that they could at least keep it competitive, and it was competitive, just not from the way I thought it was going to be. It was a very low-scoring game. J.K. Dobbins with another somewhat disappointing performance. I mean, he did put up about 9 points, so that's not bad from a full PPR league standpoint, but definitely a tough matchup for him. Didn't play the best. Ladd McConkey is starting to really get a bigger role in this offense. I think that he might end up being the top guy going forward. So Ladd McConkey, definitely worth a start every week, just because he's looking like the alpha. And Quentin Johnson kind of went down this game in my eyes with only 1 reception for 9 yards. And then you look at the Kansas City side of things. Rushing-wise, Carson Steele had that fumble, and his role just completely went away. So I think that Carson Steele and Samaje Perine are both guys that in deeper leagues you could maybe keep, but at this point it looks like Carson Steele has lost his job, and Kareem Hunt came in and had a pretty decent game. So Kareem Hunt's probably going to be the guy going forward, I would imagine. Samaje Perine, I think, will continue to be the second guy. But I don't know. Carson Steele looks like he lost his role in this offense this week after having a pretty decent game last week. So that's very disappointing for people who were very high on Carson Steele this year with the Isaiah Pacheco injury. Fortunately, it's looking like that's not the case. And then Kansas City receiving-wise, Travis Kelce finally came back. We were expecting him to show up eventually, and he actually did, but it took a Rashee Rice injury for him to come back. So his value definitely goes up with no Rashee Rice, no doubt. So Travis Kelce might be the top guy in this offense going forward. And then Xavier Worthy, obviously, he goes up too. He had that huge touchdown in this game. So I think Xavier Worthy is going to be gaining an even bigger role in this offense now with no Rashee Rice. So all these other people, not worth roster spots receiver-wise on this team. So just really Xavier Worthy and Kelce are the guys that are worth spots when it comes to the receivers in Kansas City, unless they go and get someone like, let's say, DeAndre Hopkins, or they go get someone that is a solidified, pretty good fantasy wide receiver. Their value would go up tremendously with Mahomes under center for them. But yeah, Kansas City 17, Chargers 10. Kansas City's 4-0 in the season. Chargers are 2-2. Bills, Ravens. Man, what a game this was for the Ravens. They just absolutely popped off. I mean, Derrick Henry with just an absolute monster game once again, proving all the Derrick Henry haters wrong. He is still an elite running back. 24 carries for 199 yards and a touchdown. First play of scrimmage, just takes one to the house. I mean, Derrick Henry is no joke. He continues to kind of go up in my rankings for running backs going forward. And he also had the receiving touchdown too, which is something you don't see often from Derrick Henry. So that was pretty exciting to see as well. And then you look at the receiving side of things, and the receivers in Baltimore continue to be very disappointing. Justice Hill is definitely worth a roster spot, though. I mean, he definitely has the receiving opportunities in this offense, the checkdowns. So Justice Hill is going to continue to be one of those guys to definitely keep on a roster spot, and wouldn't even be a bad flex play every week with how he's playing. But everyone else on this offense, Zay Zay Flowers is definitely still the top guy, but I mean, he has had back-to-back pretty bad weeks. And just the amount of targets, I mean, it was a blowout. So, I mean, the Ravens did rush the ball a lot more than pass it. And then Mark Andrews, man, dude, he just continues to be the most disappointing tight end on the year. And I don't think it's going to get any better for him. So, Isaiah Likely, obviously, he had that first big week, but right now he doesn't really look like he's worth starting either, just because his passing attack in Baltimore is just not that great. So, and then you look at the Bills side of things, and yes, it was a disappointing game for pretty much everyone around the board. I mean, you did see a little bit of optimism with Dalton Kincaid. He had the most targets in this offense. He showed that he's definitely one of the more top tight ends in this league, and I think his role is just going to continue to grow and grow. So Shakir, obviously, still looking like he's the top receiver on this team, so continue to, if you want to flex him, flex him. Keon Coleman had a all right game. Definitely worth a roster spot for sure in leagues going forward, just because I think his role will continue to grow with him being a rookie. He's still getting his legs under him. So, and then James Cook, disappointing game. Not going to overreact though. I mean, they were down pretty much this whole game. He only had 9 carries, so nothing I'm really too concerned about James Cook. This was just not a good matchup going in for Buffalo. And Baltimore just blew him out of the water. They're 2-2. Buffalo's now 3-1. And now we got the Monday night games. We will start with the most boring one, I would say. For sure, this game was pretty boring. Yes, the Titans put up 31 points, but I mean, really the big thing to take away from this game is Will Levis might not be the starter anymore. We'll see. I think Mason Rudolph might take that spot, so we'll kind of see. We'll manage that, see how that goes. And then the rushing side of things, Tony Pollard, Tajee Spears both get touchdowns. Tony Pollard with the receiving aspect too. He had 2 receptions for 20 yards, so a pretty good game for Pollard. Can't be disappointed in that whatsoever. And then the receiving side of things, I mean, this was just terrible. I mean, 102 passing yards, and I mean, DeAndre Hopkins led the team in receiving. Calvin Ridley continues to be disappointing. Calvin Ridley at this point, he's losing a lot of value. This is back-to-back weeks that were terrible for him. So, is Hopkins turning into the top guy on this offense? That's a maybe. I mean, it's definitely a maybe for sure. Calvin Ridley's definitely been very disappointing, though, these last 2 games. And then you look at the Miami side of things, and with Miami, obviously it's just going to continue to be disappointing until Tua comes back. A-Chain played terrible. I mean, 3 receptions, 14 yards, 10 carries for 15 yards. Just very disappointing game for A-Chain. I was very high on him to play pretty well this week just because I was thinking everything was going to go to him. And I thought that their offense would be a little bit better with Tyler Huntley, but man, was I wrong. I mean, Huntley played terrible. He did get that rushing touchdown, but that really doesn't matter at all, really. Waddle and Tyreek Hill are going to continue to be disappointing until Tua comes back. So it's getting to the point where are these guys even worth flex spots to even start? I mean, Tyreek Hill, with his talent perspective, you got to start him every week. Jalen Waddle, you feel like you still got to start him every week. But for right now, just because of how bad their offense looks, I don't even know if they're even worth starting right now, to be honest with you. So we're just going to continue to monitor that, see who they're going to start next week, because honestly, after Huntley's performance, I don't know how you start Huntley. I think you go for Skylar Thompson again. I mean, they're just in shambles. They don't know what they're doing without Tua. So the Tennessee's 1-3, first win on the season. Miami goes to 1-3. And then the last Monday night game was an absolute banger. What a game for the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff with literally perfect completion percentage, 292 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs with a pretty big game, had the 2 touchdowns, 14 carries for 78 yards, and Montgomery 12 carries for 40, and he got himself a touchdown as well. So pretty big for him. So Yeah, pretty big week for them overall. But very odd was seeing Jahmyr Gibbs not get any receiving usage, which is what we were expecting a lot from him this year, and he hasn't really gotten a lot of it so far. He had one game, I think, seven targets, 7 receptions. But other than that, his receiving usage has been kind of down to start the year, which is a little bit concerning, just because that really boosts his fantasy value up, because he is a great receiving back, but they just haven't really been using him that much. And then Jameson Williams, obviously, with the huge touchdown. That's just his value. He's going to continue to shine in some games and then just disappear in others. So just continue to rate him that way. What's up, Jay? How are you doing today, man? You said, do I trade DK Ridley for Ayuk, McBride, Waddle? First off, I think that you do if you need some depth, because I think Waddle will get better with Tua back, and then Ayuk. Yes, he's been disappointing to start this year, but I would take Ayuk over Ridley personally. DK is obviously like the most valuable player in this trade from what it looks like right now, but getting a top tight end in McBride and then getting 2 wide receivers that I think will be better towards the end of the season, I think that you take that, because Ridley's been very disappointing. I think he's definitely a guy that you definitely get rid of if you can. DK, yes, he's a little bit hard to get rid of, especially with how he's been playing to start the season. But I think that those 3 guys are worth more than DK and Ridley, so I'd probably go for that personally. And also, man, if you're new to the channel, you ever have any other questions or anything, please like this video, subscribe, dude. I'd appreciate it greatly, my man. But yeah, Sam Laporta finally had somewhat of a decent game. Hopefully he continues to have a bigger role in this offense going forward, but he's also been a disappointment on the tight end spot this year. Amon-Ra with a pretty big game, too. He had that passing touchdown. That was really cool to watch. And then Amon-Ra, 6 receptions, 45 yards. So he's obviously continuing to be the top guy in this team. And then Seahawks side of things, Geno Smith, a lot of passing volume in this game for him. Kenneth Walker with a huge game, had 3 touchdowns, 12 carries, 80 yards. So Kenneth Walker continues to go up a lot in my rankings. 4 receptions, 36 yards. Big game for him. But Zach Charbonnet, he obviously still has a role. He had the 5 receptions, 39 yards. But DK, huge game, just talking about him. 7 receptions, 104 yards off of 12 targets. Lockett, 9 targets, 5 receptions, 61 yards. Jackson Smith and Jimba, 8 receptions, 51 yards, 12 targets. So all 3 of those guys definitely worth roster spots still. Jackson Smith, a little bit higher on him compared to Tyler Lockett, obviously, but DK is still the number 1 guy here, and it's going to stay that way. So, but what a game that was. That was a fun game to watch. Detroit got the dub, 42-29. So yeah, that's it for all the matchups this week. I will be back later on this week to go through the my SGS league. Go through that. Go through the Week 5 matchups and all that as well. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in, who all tuned in today.